Hello, and welcome to my Armored Core tier list. This is a little bit of a different kind of video than I normally do. I'm doing this because I recently went and played all 15 Armored Core games in a row. I had zero previous experience with Armored Core. Had never played an Armored Core game before, was only vaguely familiar with what they even were, frankly. But I just marathoned all 15 of them, so I figured it would be kind of interesting to make a video like this, just sort of relaying my experiences with the series from the perspective of somebody who is coming into it brand new. So just a couple things before we start. Just keep in mind that this is all first impressions. Like, none of this is set in stone. I have gone through all of these games once. I'm sure that as time goes on, my feelings about a lot of these games will evolve. So it's not meant to be, like, this is not my final word on anything. So I just want to get that out there. This is purely from the perspective of a new Armored Core player, okay? And it's also going to be pretty off the cuff. I have a few notes here just so I don't forget anything, but I'm really just going to talk briefly about each of the games, what I think about them, how I think they rank relative to the other games, and just sort of give my general thoughts. I'm not going to go too deep on any one of them. All right? And so, without any further ado, let's get started. I have these arranged in a chronological order, and that's how I'm going to talk about them. I don't know why there's an extra Armored Core 5 there, but I didn't make this tier list. So yeah, let's just get started. Armored Core, 1997, game that started it all. This I am going to put in the solid tier. I think what's really impressive about this game is that it really sets the template for the entire series. Like, every single one of these games that is about to follow adheres pretty closely to the formula established in this game. Like, obviously, there's quite a bit of variation, but all of the major tenets, I guess you could say, of Armored Core are established here and not really deviated from all that much, at least like from a philosophical perspective and from a gameplay loop perspective. So for anyone who isn't really familiar with the general premise of Armored Core, the idea is that the games take place in a dystopian future where the surface of the Earth is completely uninhabitable. Most of the population has been completely wiped out by cataclysmic war, and essentially what's happened is that all the remaining humans have been forced to live underground, and all of humanity is more or less completely governed by two warring corporations, and these corporations are in eternal war with each other. And to carry out war crimes on each other, they have enlisted the help of a group of individuals called the Ravens, who pilot these things called Armored Cores. The Ravens are mercenaries. They have no ideological bent. They have no real stake in the conflict between the corporations. They are purely neutral mercenaries in it for the money and nothing else. And I think what I really respect about Armored Core is just its commitment to the utter bleakness of its world. You know, it's really like there are no good guys. It's just corporations fighting each other for power using mercenaries. That's it. Like, none of these games really even attempt to present a case that one corporation is good or that another is like really worse than the other. I mean, the corporations change from game to game, but it's all basically the same story. You know, it's an incredibly cynical view, and I just sort of like their commitment to it throughout the series, and I hope that Armored Core 6 sticks to it. I'm sure it will. So Armored Core, just to talk a little bit about the gameplay loop, basically what happens is that you spend a lot of time in what they call the garage, and in the garage you piece together your Armored Core. And you have a lot of different parts, you know, the head part, the core, the arms, the legs, all your weapons, etc. And what you're doing is you're going on these missions assigned to you by corporations. You're not loyal to any one corporation. You end up working for both of them, as well as any third parties that go along. You do have a little bit of a choice as to which jobs you can take, and that does affect things. It affects how the story plays out. But yeah, so you work on your Armored Core, and then you go into the mission, and then if you succeed in the mission, you get an income and expense report. Basically, you're given a flat rate for completing the mission, and they subtract money based on how much ammo you use and how much damage is sustained to your Armored Core. And you also get additional money, or you'll also get deducted as well based on just, like individual submissions within those missions oftentimes, which is more of a thing in the later games. But yeah, and if you fail the mission, then you can go back and see if you can muster a different build that will work. And a lot of the games is purely just tinkering. Like if you're somebody who really, really gets into customization and specialization, you will find a lot to enjoy about Armored Core for sure. And the best Armored Core games really just make it a fun puzzle to try to piece together what kind of build is going to work better for which missions, etc. So, yeah, that's Armored Core. The first Armored Core game is very good. It's definitely at its best when you are outside. Like when you're gliding around, zipping around, fighting other Armored Cores or MTs, which are just these sort of like lesser robots. It is an absolute blast. There's sort of a proto stamina mechanic for the Souls fans. It's called energy in these games. It affects what kind of actions you can take, your mobility, that sort of thing. Outside missions are great. If there's one major criticism I have this game, and this goes really for the entire first gen of Armored Core, it's that there are a lot of indoor missions, and those missions are really not as good. You know, it's one thing when you're outside and you have a lot of, freedom of motion and all that, but there are quite a few missions where you are indoors, shooting down narrow hallways at things that are shooting back at you, and you don't always have a lot of room to maneuver and that sort of thing. So, it's not great. I understand that a lot of that is just a function of the technical limitations of the PlayStation 1. But yeah, it's unfortunate. And also, I do want to say that the last level of this game, Armored Core, is probably the worst level in the whole series. Like, you have to do this extremely painful platforming section on these floating cubes, and it took me like an hour just to get past the one room, and it's absolutely awful. No idea what they were thinking, and that's a thing. Like, these games do not excel at platforming at all, and the more that they rely on precision platforming, especially early on, the worse it gets. So, Armored Core, really good game, very solid. Like I said, the thing that's impressive about it to me is just how well it establishes a formula that will be adhered to throughout the next however many years of Armored Core. Now next, we have Armored Core Project Phantasma. This came out pretty shortly after the first game, and It's good. If there's an issue with it, it's really just that it's quite short. There's only 17 missions as opposed to there's like 40 something missions in Armored Core 1. And so as a result, it just ends up feeling a little bit slight in comparison. However, it does introduce something that is going to be very prevalent throughout the series, which is the arena, which is basically it's a mode where you can just choose to fight another Armored Core one-on-one, and it's just a pure just your skill against theirs. There's no penalty for failure or anything like that. And which is another thing I should mention is that in Armored Core they sort of phase this out later, but if you fail a mission, you're still responsible for all the financial implications of that. You still get docked, and so as a new player, it's very easy to fall in debt and not be able to afford to upgrade your mech, and it can feel really overwhelming. It's like you're drowning. But yeah, there's no penalty for losing to the arena, which makes it fun. It's a very easy way to get a lot of money early in the game. You know, when you're struggling with a mission and you need to get out of debt, you can go and you can try your hand at some arena fights against some Armored Cores, and it's really good. Yeah, and like I said, Project Phantasma, it's good, but it feels more like an expansion pack to the first Armored Core. I'm still gonna put it in the solid tier, but it is just it's that little half step down. Story wise, it is a direct sequel to Armored Core, and it has to do with this organization called the Doomsday Organization, who is engineering this massive weapon system called Project Phantasma, and it's about the struggle for power of control over that. So yeah, I don't really have too much more to say about Project Phantasma. Like I said, it's a good game, but it's just not much of an evolution over the first Armored Core game. So next we have Master of Arena, which is the final Armored Core game for PS1, and I'm going to put this up in the excellent tier because for the simple reason that it is really just a combination of everything good about Armored Core and Project Phantasma. It has more missions, and the arena is actually a big part of it. If I remember correctly, the arena is actually a mandatory part of the game now, whereas it wasn't in Project Phantasma. Yeah, it's just Armored Core but more. You know, it's got all the same parts that you get to choose from for your mech from Armored Core and Project Phantasma, plus a whole lot more. It's just bigger and badder in pretty much every way. Story-wise, it has to do with like you play as somebody whose family was killed in this violent outbreak between these two warring corporations. So you join the Raven's Nest, which is the organization that deploys the Ravens, or the Armored Cores, in hopes to get revenge. So yeah, that's basically it. Master of Arena, really good game. It's basically just it's a culmination of the PS1 era of Armored Core, and it's really good. Like, I think if you only play one PS1 game from this series, it should be Master of Arena. So now, moving on to Armored Core 2. I'm gonna get a little unpopular with this, I think. I know a lot of people really love Armored Core 2. I personally did not have a very good time with this game. First of all, I do want to say it looks beautiful for like an early PS2 game. The graphics are very impressive. The Armored Cores themselves look very good. The environments are a lot better, as you would expect, considering the jump in hardware. The sound effects, very good as well. Like, I love the sound of the energy weapons in this game in particular. The problem, though, is that I don't really like the way it feels compared to the previous games. Like, you feel slower. You don't feel as agile, and you have lower defense. It just seems like everything is able to chew through your defense a lot easier. And as a result, it's really freaking hard. Like, it's really damn hard, but not in a way that I appreciated like some of the later games. And I should also talk about the fact that, like, in general, these games they can be very hard. Like FromSoft's reputation for difficulty definitely holds true in all of these games. But it feels better to deal with in some games than others. Yeah, Armored Core 2, the story is kind of interesting. It does follow the first three games, which is going to be kind of a rarity going forward. The game likes to reboot its timeline a lot. A lot of this one takes place on Mars, and it has to do with like the recolonization efforts on Mars. And it's kind of cool. It's the only one of these games that takes place somewhere other than Earth. So what else? Yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me is that the missions in this game are honestly really bad. I did not enjoy the mission design in this game. It's a lot of missions where you're in a cramped space, where there's a ton of stuff shooting at you. You don't have that much room to maneuver. And that goes for indoors and outdoors, by the way. Like, for some reason, this game likes to put you outside with a ton of enemies and then give you this little square box to maneuver around in. And I was constantly going out of bounds on accident in this game. Like, it was very frustrating to just like be outside in like a vast, desert or whatever on Mars, and then just not be able to move anywhere. It's crazy. And I'm sure, again, it's probably a technological limitation, but it soured me on it. There are some mechanical evolutions that this game brought, one of which is a stat called heating. Basically, the way it works is that if you take too much damage from a certain type of weapon, your AC will overheat and your health will begin to drain very rapidly. To accommodate for this, you can get a radiator that will prevent you from overheating and or excel the cooling process once you do begin to overheat. We will talk much more about heating later on, but it's not too bad in this game. It is introduced here, and it's important to note. Another thing that was introduced is overboosting, which is basically like you can expel a tremendous amount of energy to go very fast. I actually didn't know about this mechanic until after I beat the game, because it doesn't really explain it to you. It's it would have been helpful in certain situations probably, although like I said, you don't really have much room to maneuver. The areas are pretty small, so I don't know how much going fast would have really helped you. This game introduces a couple of different part types. Like, there's extensions which you can use to do things like fire relation missiles, which if you have regular missiles, the relation missiles will fire alongside them. Or you have missile interceptors, which do exactly as the name implies, where if somebody's shooting missiles at you, they will attempt to intercept the missiles with sort of like a counter missile effect. And then there's inside parts, which do things like drop mines or whatever. I didn't really get much use out of them because you have to toggle them from your weapons menu, and it's a little bit cumbersome. I never really found them particularly useful. So yeah, Armored Core 2, I'm gonna put this in eh. I know a lot of people love it. I just didn't really have a lot of fun with it. I found it pretty frustrating. There are like certain missions that I can think of off the top of my head that just drove me insane in this game. So yeah, not one of my favorites. And next we have Armored Core 2 Another Age. Now here's an interesting one. This is essentially an expansion of Armored Core 2. It is non-narrative, meaning it doesn't have an overarching narrative. Basically, it's just a series of missions where you're carrying out jobs. for the corporations that are present in Armored Core 2, but there is no like through line between them. They're literally just one-off missions, and there's a ton of them. There's like 100 of them, literally. And here's what I'll say for Armored Core 2: Another Age. I do think that the missions are a step up from what is in Armored Core 2. I found a lot of them to be pretty memorable, honestly. Like, there's one where you fight a gigantic MT that is this, like, absolutely massive death machine that flies over the desert, and you have to find a way to kill it, and it's really hard, and it took a lot of figuring out, but yeah, there's a few like that. It also has one of the few fights in this series that I just sort of noped out on. After you complete every mission, you get like a sort of a secret AC battle, and he just whooped my ass so many times that I was like, whatever. After 100 missions, I was kind of jonesing to move on. So yeah, this is a weird one to rank. It's basically like Armored Core 2, except with no plot, slightly better missions, more parts. If I'm being completely honest, I had a little bit better time with it, so I'm just gonna put it in tier, just slightly ahead of Armored Core 2. Maybe that's controversial, I don't know. Okay, so moving on. Armored Core 3. Now here is a great game. Armored Core 3, I am going to put in the excellent tier. Right here. This is a game that I think that if you are new to the series, if you're watching this and you're thinking you might like to try Armored Core, this is, in my opinion, probably the best place to start. It's, I think, the most user-friendly out of any of the early Armored Core games. They do a little bit better job of explaining just the various stats and mechanics and how the parts work and everything like that, which is a little bit of an issue in the early games. They don't always do a super good job of explaining things to you. And so yeah, Armored Core 3, it's just a really, really nice evolution. It is a reboot of the series, so it's just a complete reboot of the continuity from the previous games, and it more or less follows the same plot as Armored Core. Humans live underground following nuclear war. Everything is controlled by corporations. You get the gist. This game makes a few innovations to the series, mechanically speaking. A big one is left-handed weapons. In the previous games, you were allowed to carry a blade that was sort of infinitely reusable in your left hand, whereas you had like your standard ammunition weapon in the right hand. Starting with this game, you could start having things like a howitzer or a flamethrower in the left hand, and this really, yeah, that really changes a lot, especially in the later games. Like from this point onward, I was pretty much just always like two-handing guns and shooting a lot of stuff, and it makes it a lot easier, honestly. So that's good. You can now detach weapons mid-mission. If you no longer need a certain weapon or you run out of ammo, you can drop your weapon and it'll lighten your load. It'll give you more energy to play around with, all that sort of thing. Again, just, you know, from like a tactical perspective, it's very useful. You also get the introduction of what are called Exceed Orbit cores. So now when you buy a core, which is like your chest piece, you can have a couple of different abilities that go along with it. You can do overboosts, like I mentioned from Armored Core 2, or you could do what's called an Exceed Orbit attack, which is an energy attack that is like infinitely replenishable. So when you decide to use it, you have a certain amount of ammunition, and when you put it away, it'll slowly regen, and that makes it so that you're never truly out of ammo in a mission. It's a really good idea. It's a really useful mechanic, and it's one that's going to carry out through a lot of the games. What else? Oh, yes, you can hire consorts now for missions. You can essentially give part of your pay to an AI, Armored Core or MT to assist you with the mission if you're having some trouble with it, that can be useful. More so for the Armored Cores. The MTs aren't particularly useful in my experience. What else? Oh, you now get graded on your missions. You can do, S, A, B, C, D, etc. And depending on how well you do in certain missions, you can gain hidden parts, which is pretty neat. It's not always entirely clear what you have to do well in these missions from a letter grade standpoint. Sometimes that kind of stuff can be a little bit obscure, but it is pretty cool to be able to go back and retry missions and see if you can do better at them and potentially gain some new stuff. So yeah, Armored Core 3, it's just a really good, really well balanced, really well considered game. One of the better ones in the franchise. And speaking of one of the better games in the franchise, Silent Line. Now this is a great game. It's basically just Armored Core 3, but a little bit better. It's got more parts. It's got a pretty cool story that involves... It takes place a few years after Armored Core 3, and basically what's happened is that humans are starting to recolonize the Earth, at least the surface of the Earth, and there's a mysterious region of the Earth that is referred to as the Silent Line that's kind of like a Bermuda Triangle-esque thing where people go there, they disappear, nobody knows what the deal with it is, and eventually the plot has to do with like a giant space laser that is capable of catastrophic damage. And one of the best missions, in my opinion, in the entire series is in this game, where you're fighting off waves of MTs and then you're fighting in Armored Core while the space laser rains down on you, and you have to keep moving or else it'll hit you for massive damage, and it tries to track your movements and anticipate where you're going to be, and it's really tricky, but it's really exciting and it's really fun, and it's one of many just very impactful moments in this game. This is definitely one of the better games in the franchise. I am going to put it in the excellent tier. Yeah, like I said, it's Armored Core 3, but just a little bit more refined, a little more dramatic. It is very difficult. I'll say that. It's easily the most difficult Armored Core up to this point, but I don't know. I found it fun. I didn't find it frustrating in an Armored Core 2 sort of way. I found the challenge very rewarding. There's a lot of mission variety in this game. Just some pretty interesting locations as well. And yeah, I should mention also, there is a ton of parts in this game. There are over 400 parts, up from around 200 parts in Armored Core 3. So they literally just doubled the part count, which just gives you more options and allows you to specialize your build more. And given the fact that it's a really difficult game, you're probably going to want to do that. So, yeah, it's very well considered. Mechanically, there aren't a ton of changes to the series here. One thing I should mention is that weapons now take damage. You can damage an Armored Core's weapon, and they won't be able to use it anymore. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Silent Line. It's a great game. Definitely one of the better ones in the series. Would not start out with it, because like I said, it is pretty difficult. I would still recommend starting with Armored Core 3. And if you like it, move on to Silent Line. Oh boy. Next, we have Armored Core Nexus. This one, from what I can tell, has a really high variance in terms of what people think about it. I've looked at other tier lists, and it seems like there are a lot of people for whom it's one of their favorites in the series, and a lot of people for whom it's one of their least favorite. For me, I gotta say, I think this game is bad. Yeah, it's bad. And, well, let's talk about it. There were some significant rebalancing changes in this game. So it's actually pretty different from Armored Core 3 and Silent Line. In fact, like, you could consider this the start of what you might call like Armored Core Generation 3.5. It is the generation, for example, where analog sticks start to be used, which is something that I haven't really talked about, but this series, it does take a lot of getting used to in terms of the controls. It started on the PS1, so obviously you didn't have analog sticks. The way that you have to move around and look around is pretty difficult to get used to. But once you do get used to it, it's fine. However, once they did start fully implementing the DualShock analog sticks, it is an undeniable improvement. So I will give that much to this game. However, as far as the balancing of the game goes, anyone who has played this game knows exactly what I'm going to talk about, and that is overheating. Boy, oh boy, overheating in this game. I mentioned it a little bit with Armored Core 2, but in this game, overheating is taken to such an extreme that it feels like a mistake. Like, it feels like a glitch. Like, if this game came out today, there would be a patch for overheating instantly, I feel like, because it is the defining mechanic of this game. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. Your entire build needs to be about mitigating heat, or else you are going to have a miserable time. Like, this game introduces parts tuning to where you buy a part and then for a certain cost you can sort of like rebalance its attributes, like weight, cooling, etc. You gotta just put everything into cooling, man, because if you don't, like, you're fucked. You are gonna melt instantly, dude. Like, because not only does getting hit by enemies raise your heat a lot, but also using your weapons causes heat, and boosting now causes heat, and it causes a lot of heat, like a ridiculous amount of heat. So it's like, you need parts with high cooling. You need to tune those parts so that they are proficient even more so in cooling. You need to have the optional part that gives you even more cooling. I mean, it's insane, and it honestly ruins this game. Like, I don't know what else to say about it. Like, even though there are a lot of parts in this game, and that's one thing that people who like it will say, is that, oh, you have so many parts, there's so many options. Well, that's true, but the reality is that because your build needs to revolve around cooling so much, it actually limits your options pretty severely in terms of what you can use. So yeah, it's not great, man. And then the other thing is that the missions are bad, like very, very bad, even worse than Armored Core 2. Poorly designed missions, pretty, like, just boring and frustrating. It's not always explained to you very well what you're supposed to do. Just not very well designed, in my opinion. I mean, there are certain things that I will say for it in its favor. One thing is the score. I haven't mentioned the score yet, but the soundtracks for these games absolutely fucking slap. It's this really, really awesome, like, 90s hardcore techno synthwave shit that I love personally. And Armored Core Nexus might have the best OST out of any of the games, ironically. Is just an absolute slapper of a soundtrack. Go on YouTube and listen to it. It's a lot more fun than playing this game. I will say, story-wise, it's kind of cool. It takes place 50 years after Silent Line. There's a new corporation on the scene called Navis that has acquired some sort of mysterious ancient technology that it is working with, and the other corporations see it as a threat and want to take it, and it's all about the power struggle for that, and that part of it is pretty cool. Another thing that's kind of interesting is the fact that when you fail a mission in this game, a lot of times you just can't do the mission again. Like, it's just lost to you. Which I guess I'm of two minds about. On the one hand, I do conceptually like the fact that your failure dictates how the story goes, but on the other hand, like, a lot of the missions it's so easy to fail a mission because it's so difficult. You're just overheating constantly. Also, like, ECM, which is basically like ECM is a stat that essentially jams all of your head sensors, like your map and your radar and everything like that. A ton of missions in this game just start out like jamming your ECM, and when your ECM is jammed, it plays this horrible beeping noise. It's really annoying, and it goes throughout the entire level, and it's absurd. So you're just like you're running around just overheating like crazy with this annoying beeping going on. It's a nightmare. They also ruined the arena. I'm sorry to say, like, the arena has been a thing, and they basically just made it part of the critical path that you can do, and if you lose it, you can't retry it a lot of the time, and it stinks. And yeah, Armored Core Nexus, I know it has its fans, but personally, I did not enjoy it very much. Now, moving on. Ninebreaker. Now, this is an interesting one. This is, as far as I can tell, a non-canonical Armored Core game. Or, like, if it is canonical, I'm not really sure when exactly it's supposed to take place, because it evidently occurs during peacetime. Which I don't know when that would be exactly. This is a non-narrative game that is essentially divided into two halves. Two different modes that you can play. The first is just straight up arena fights. Pretty simple. You know, you can carry over your save from Nexus, which I haven't mentioned yet, is something that you can do between a lot of the games. Like, you can carry over your data from Armored Core into Project Phantasma and into Master of Arena, for example. You can do that from Nexus. I will say they did chill out a little bit on the heating. they rebalanced that, so it's still there and it's still annoying, but it's not quite as bad. So yeah, you have the arena fights. And then you also have these training missions that are basically just like testing, like, how accurate you can shoot, like how fast you can go, you know, how good you are at dodging things, how good you are at platforming things, and sort of like precision boosting and that sort of thing. And all that's fine if you're into that. I personally really wasn't. It's not bad. It's fine for what it is. But I can't imagine really wanting to go back and replay this when the other games exist. And I feel like if I had bought this back in the day, I probably would have felt a little bit ripped off. But, you know, it's sort of like a Metal Gear VR missions thing, where it's just like, the mechanics are fun, and it's fine, but free of context, then I just don't really have much use for it. So, I'm going to respectfully put this in the tier, because like I said, it's fine for what it is, but I just don't really care for it. Which brings us to Formula Front. Now, this is a weird one. This is a PSP game, and I should clarify that I played Formula Front International, which I understand is a little bit different in some respects from other versions of this. Essentially what this is, it's another non-narrative game. It takes place in a world where fighting AI-controlled armored cores is like a sport, like a recreational activity that people do, and like people are like considered really, really good architects of armored cores. And basically what you do in this game is you build a mech, and then you program its AI, and you have it fight a series of other mechs. And what you can do, you can actually do a lot of AI specialization in this game. Like, you can program your mech's tendencies, like, will it fight from long range, will it fight from close range, etc. You can also earn these things called like microchips, which basically like script events for you in the battle. Like, you can make it so that at the 30-second mark they start shooting missiles, and that sort of thing, or they will start to boost into the sky and shoot, and that sort of thing. And that all sounds pretty interesting, right? Well, there's just one problem, and that's that the AI does not work. It just flat out does not work. Like, you can program it to do all sorts of shit. Like, you can program it to stay away from the opponent, but it'll just get up in there anyways. You can program it to only use this weapon or that weapon or use this tactic or that tactic, but it's not going to do it. It is quite literally just non-functional, and it sort of renders the entire game pointless. I mean, so you do have the option to go in and play manually in this game, but like all the mechanics revolve around the AI, so it kind of defeats the purpose, right? And like the AI doesn't work. So it's like it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, another problem is that I basically had two experiences with this game. One was trying to build the type of mech that I usually build in these games, which is like a mobile mech that is very lightweight and that flies around and shoots rifles and machine guns, you know, maybe some missiles, etc. And it was next to impossible. I was losing almost every single match. And then I decided to build a tank that had big like laser cannons, and it completely annihilated every single AI in the game. I think I may have lost like a couple matches, but that's it. So the two modes that I found for this were like impossible and cakewalk, and none of the AI features worked. So weird thing, I'm gonna have to put it dead last in my Armored Core rankings, unfortunately. It is it's an experiment that I think if they had done it later, maybe on some better hardware and just had like some better AI programming, it might be kind of interesting, but as it is, it's more or less a total failure. Now, from the nadir to the peak, let's talk about Armored Core Last Raven. This is easily my favorite Armored Core game. This is going in the amazing tier. Oh boy. Where to start with this one? This one I really just think of as being like a perfectly condensed and refined diamond that represents basically everything great about the Armored Core series and the PS2 era of Armored Core in particular. This game probably has my favorite story presentation in the entire series. It has this really neat 24-hour countdown gimmick where, you know, in this world, it's a pretty familiar scenario where after the events of Nexus, there are a bunch of corporations, and in this game, they have all coalesced into a mega corporation called the Alliance. There is a resistance team of mechs called Vertex, and they are led by an AC named Jacko, and they are fighting against the monopoly that the Alliance represents. And this game has a gimmick where when the game starts, it's 24 hours till all-out war between these two factions, the Alliance and the Vertex, and every time you complete a mission, depending on which one you decide to pick, the timer goes down a little bit more. So you'll finish a mission, then it's like 20 hours till attack, or like 16 hours, and it goes like that. And it's not like, you're not literally on a time limit, but it just adds such a nice sense of like drama to the game. You know what I mean? It makes it feel like you're moving along and you're building towards something. And you're also given a lot of options as to how you can actually move through this story. Like, there are 7 endings in this game, which is by far the most of any Armored Core. Most of these games do not have multiple endings, but this one, they really just went all out. There are 7. I did 6 on my playthrough. There's an optional super boss that I basically just noped out of because I was like, well, someday I'll get to this, but I kind of just want to move on to the next game. But yeah, Armored Core Last Raven, if you read anything at all about this game, the thing that you will read most often is that it is the most difficult Armored Core game in the franchise, and it absolutely is. No question. Hands down, it's the toughest one. It is brutally difficult. There's no getting around it. If you are brand new to Armored Core, do not start with this game. You have to have beaten, I would say, if you can beat Silent Line and you like it, then you should try to give Last Raven a chance. Okay? It is very tough. It is unforgiving. A lot, like some of the earlier games, for example, like if you have multiple objectives in a mission, it will sort of play a cutscene partway through where you will like restock on your health and ammo and stuff. No such luck with this. This game loves to do something like put you through a long level, then have you fight an AC, and then have another completely different AC with a different build show up and try to fight you again. And what it does is, while you might die that first time, what you're going to do is you're going to go back into the garage, and you have, again, just a vast array of parts that you can tune, their particular attributes that you need, and you're going to try to find a build that can work for every situation that particular mission throws at you. And while that can be a long process, that can be a very brutal process, I think it's very fun because of all the options given to you. It's just like, it's this puzzle that you were just constantly trying to solve from mission to mission, and it ends up really emphasizing the granular detail of these mechs. This is the first time in the series, for example, that I really started using inside parts a lot, because it's so demanding that you sort of have to pull out all the stops and engage with all the mechanics. And I really enjoyed it. I could see how it would be frustrating for some people, and it definitely frustrated me at times, but I found the process very fulfilling, very fun. Let's see, what else? What can I say about Last Raven? Parts break in this one. Which is pretty brutal. Like, if you get low enough on health, like your legs will break and that sort of thing, and your AC will lose functionality. It's not as big of a part of the game as you might think. It pretty much only happens when you get really low on AP, but it is a thing, and if you break apart, you will have to go and buy it again. But like I said, for me that was pretty rare, so it's not a huge setback. One piece of criticism I would have is how they handled the arena. This time the arena requires you to place a bet to participate, and the amount that you win is always double the amount that you have to bet. So if you lose a battle, you can no longer make money on that battle. You can only break even if you win the second time. And if you lose more than twice, then you end up losing money. And it's like, on one level, I can sort of respect the harshness of that, but really I like the arena as sort of a stakes-free environment. As you go through, you gain parts for beating arena opponents and stuff. So yeah, Last Raven, really, it's just like I said, it's everything that I really liked about the PS2 era of Armored Core, but just done completely right. It's a great game. It's my favorite in the series. It's fantastic. And it's a great way to cap off the PS2 era. And now we are going to move on to the PS3 era with Armored Core 4. Now, we have some very big changes happening in Armored Core with Armored Core 4. This, notably, is the first game in the franchise to be directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, who, of course, would go on to direct Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, all those games that we love. This was his first game as director ever, and it is very different from the previous games. It is a reboot, so all of the previous continuity is excised. It's pretty familiar. It's governments are replaced by corporations. and their battles are fought, you know, in these proxy wars by the Armored Cores. In this game, they're called Nexts for some reason. I guess it's meant to like illustrate that they are like a more advanced form of technology beyond Armored Cores. And so every time they're referred to in this game, they're called Nexts. And at first I was so confused. I was like, what the fuck is a Next? But anyways, biggest difference, gameplay-wise, between Armored Core 4 and the previous generation is that it is fast. It is very fast. Any sort of like grounded feel that the series had is now gone. It is all about speed and agility and action, and it is mostly successful, I will say. It is very fast. You can zip around. So a big mechanic in this game is called quick boosting, which is a new addition, where in addition to your regular boost, you can sort of do like a very, very quick burst that allows you to dodge anything that's coming. For the Dark Souls heads, it's like a proto roll, essentially. It's basically just like, it's the thing you do anytime someone's attacking you is you quick boost. And it can lead to some pretty insane encounters, especially when you're going really, really fast. Like there are times, especially in the next game, For Answer, where you're going so incredibly fast, and you and your opponent are both quick boosting around so much that it almost becomes like funny. You just like, you can't even keep each other on the screen. So I have conflicted theories about this game. It feels very good to play. It's very fun. The added mobility is cool. Boosting is no longer like a big deal. Like you don't really have to manage your energy. In fact, if you build the right kind of AC, you can just sort of like float indefinitely and actually like gain energy while you're in the air. The problem is that I don't think they really did a very good job of balancing the game for that kind of speed, because Armored Core 4 is very easy. It is by far the easiest game in the franchise, in my opinion, and I was a little bit let down by that. You know, every time I thought that I arrived at like a big important boss or set piece that was going to challenge me, I almost always just beat it first try, and I was kind of like, well, okay. I mean, I will say there is a hard mode of this game that I have not yet tried. I definitely will, and maybe that'll affect the way that I think about this game, but normal mode is too easy, in my opinion. What else? Oh, primal armor is a thing now. Basically, it's just like an energy shield, and it is powered by what they call in this game Kojima particles, which is funny. And Kojima particles are oh, I'm trying to think. Are Kojima particles in this game? Yeah. Kojima particles are in this game. Yeah, so the Kojima particles are basically talked about like they're radiation, essentially. Like they are nuclear energy, and that comparison is definitely going to be elaborated upon a little bit more in Armored Core For Answer. But basically, you don't want to have your primal armor broken, because you will start taking a lot more damage once it is broken. You can balance your mechs such that you have more or less primal armor, and it's a pretty cool mechanic, and it's one that, judging from the Armored Core 6 trailer, appears to be back. So that is something to keep an eye on. What else can we talk about? Oh, bipeds, as in mechs that don't use tanks and just use like regular two-legged models, can just equip cannons on their back now. In previous games, you needed a tank build to like just put these massive cannons on your back, but now you can just do that in Armored Core 4, which again just sort of adds to like how easy this game feels. To account for the speed of the game, the arenas are significantly bigger than they were in past games, but I have to say they did not quite feel big enough I still felt a little bit constrained. So that was a little bit of a bummer. I just felt like they needed to be a little bit more robust, and that is something that would be addressed in the next game, Armored Core 4 Answer. So, Armored Core 4, it's a good game. Not one of my favorites in the series. It's definitely a transitional game. So I'm going to put it in the solid tier, but it's gonna be like near the bottom of the solid tier. It's honestly like bordering on eh. And I liked it less after I played Armored Core 4 Answer, which is going right up here. Yup. Armored Core 4 Answer is an amazing game. It is my second favorite in the series after Last Raven. This is the second game directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, and the way that you can think about it is that it is basically just Armored Core 4 but better in every single way. Like, truly, it is just everything that Armored Core did. Armored Core 4 Answer just does it all a little bit better. The story is a little bit more fleshed out. The difficulty balancing feels a lot better. The sense of scale feels a little bit more appropriate. It's an awesome game. It's so empowering, like the movement feels so good. It's so fluid. Like, when you're just zipping around, quick boosting, destroying everything, it is an incredible feeling. But you don't feel like a superhuman in quite the same way that you did in Armored Core 4. Like I said, the difficulty is a lot more balanced. It's just a great game. So what's happened is that the Kojima particles have caused the surface of the Earth to be more or less uninhabitable. So what's happened is that human beings have gone up to live in these giant airships called cradles, which hang above the surface of the Earth. But some people are still made to live on the surface. And from that, a group of armored cores that are collectively known as Orca resist the corporations that control the world. And you are a mercenary who is hired both by the corporations and by the Orca. Yeah, I don't want to say too much about the story of this game, except that I thought it was one of the best in the series, for sure, and that there is an ending to this game that is so unbelievably cruel and brutal. I almost couldn't believe it. It's like, I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen it, but you essentially become like the worst person who's ever lived. It's pretty insane. Really loved it. Something that is a big deal in Armored Core 4 Answer is arms forts. So, something that Armored Core has traditionally done up to this point is anytime that there is a boss fight, it is pretty much always an Armored Core. It's you versus an Armored Core, sometimes it's two Armored Cores. And that's the way that they sort of do the climactic battles in these games. And starting with Armored Core 4 Answer, there's been a little bit of a shakeup to that formula, and now the climactic encounters are with these things called arms forts, which are essentially these gigantic, like huge, enormous weapons forts that have like immense firepower that are controlled by the corporations, and you have to go and destroy them. And they're some of the best missions in the entire series. There's one in particular called Spirit of the Motherwill that a lot of people have actually compared to the Radahn fight in Elden Ring, because as you approach it, you're just being fired upon from a distance and you have to sort of dodge the attacks before you even get there. But yeah, the arms forts are pretty much universally great. I loved every single one. The sense of scale, like I keep talking about that because that's really the overall impression I get with Armored Core 4 Answer, is just how huge and dramatic everything feels, like on a level that is just completely different from any other Armored Core game. And the arms forts are really the epitome of that. Melee combat is insane in this game. You get blades that you can wield that do absolutely fucking insane damage. So much so that those arm swords that I'm talking about, most of them you can just go ahead and kill in like 2 or 3 swipes. Like the melee weapons in this game are absolutely insane. They're really hard to land on mobile targets like another AC, but if you can do it, then it's pretty much game over. Like if you want to like basically breeze through this game, just equip a blade and just fuck everything up. It's amazing. What else? Oh, so one significant drawback that I forgot to mention from Armored Core 4 is that for whatever reason, the garage UI, like the menu, is absolutely horrible in Armored Core 4. It's probably the worst in the series. I don't want to get too much into it, but just the way that you buy and equip weapons is just like needlessly confusing for some reason. And they completely fixed it in Armored Core 4 Answer. And as a matter of fact, Armored Core 4 Answer is the first game, shockingly, the first game in the series where you can actually compare, like directly compare the stats of the part that you're going to buy with what you have currently equipped. I have no idea how it took them that long to do it, but they finally did it, and it's great. And that would continue into the next couple of games as well. So yeah, Armored Core 4 Answer is just a really amazing game. It's, like I said, it's just Armored Core 4, but better in every single way. Now, Armored Core 5. Oh boy. So, we had some major changes between the PS2 era and Armored Core 4. Well, we are going to switch it up very heavily once again with Armored Core 5. This game is basically the antithesis of everything that Armored Core 4 was. In Armored Core 4, you are zipping around like a madman, flying through the air like Superman and destroying everything in these huge dramatic set pieces, right? Well, Armored Core 5, you are back down to earth. It feels like a very, very self-conscious move away from Armored Core 4 and Armored Core 4 Answer in just about every respect. It has a very grounded tone to it. Probably more grounded than it's been since like the early Armored Core games. It is like, for one thing, you can no longer fly. There is no flying at all. What you have instead is a wall jump and a glide. So high level movement in this game is all about like jumping off of your terrain and gliding. Quick boosting is back, which you're going to want to use because it's pretty much the only way that you have to avoid damage in this game apart from stealth, which is another part that is different from other Armored Core games. Using your terrain for cover is a huge thing in Armored Core 5. I have a lot of thoughts about this game. Like, I feel very conflicted about it because the more that I played it, the more I really did appreciate the movement and the combat mechanics of it. But it just has a lot of problems, many of which would get addressed, spoiler, in Armored Core Verdict Day. But Armored Core 5, first of all, let me talk about the things that I like about it, okay? I like all the movement. I think all that stuff ended up being very successful, okay? I like the more weighty, grounded feel of it. The environments are much more realistic. You are primarily fighting in urban settings, like a dilapidated city that is totally run down, or like, like abandoned harbors and places like that. Just like toxic wastelands. It feels like a real life version of Earth that has been completely run down. And I should say, this is the first numbered entry in a while that does not erase the other previous ones. There are allusions to things that happen in Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer in these games, but they take place in the distant future. And Yeah, it's interesting. The story is nothing to write home about. In fact, I would say that that is one of the weaker aspects of the game, is the way the story is presented. It's a post-apocalyptic war. Um, there's a corporation that is very lazily called the Corporation in this one, that is led by an entity known as Father. And then there is a resistance group called the Resistance. That's pretty much it. There isn't a lot more to it than that. There was more of an effort made in this game to have some additional characterization, which hasn't been a big thing in the previous Armored Core games. Like, when you go into a story mission, there will be a cutscene where characters who are not you sort of banter with each other, and it's honestly just not very successful. In my opinion, it's a little goofy. It tonally feels very out of step with the dark and gritty reality of this game. Um, yeah, it's very strange. I should talk about some of the mechanical changes that they made in this game. There are now different ammo types, different damage types, I should say. You can now deal or receive kinetic energy damage, chemical energy damage, or thermal energy damage. And every enemy in the game has different resistances to each of those types of damage, as do you. Different parts that you can buy have different resistances, etc. I wasn't really a big fan of this. It just made things unnecessarily complicated, I felt like. And it was kind of a bummer having to go into a mission just feeling like I needed to be prepared for whatever resistances any enemy could have in there. And, like, you don't know what's in the mission beforehand. So, like, it just becomes kind of a pain. And like I mentioned before, I like to be sort of a lightweight mech. I don't like to carry around a lot of stuff on me. So I just didn't really enjoy having to carry around all this extra weaponry with way more ammo than I would probably need, just so that I could be prepared to fight anything that might have a certain, low resistance against this or that type of, type of ammo. So that was a swing and a miss for me. The UI is kind of a disaster also. There's this thing called scan mode where if you push in the right stick, you enter this mode called scan mode, where you can, when you're in scan mode, it builds your energy way faster. So anytime you're not actively engaged in battle, you pretty much need to be in scan mode. But it darkens your screen. It makes it this like weird blue tint. And this is the only way that you can check like a numerical value. Well, okay, I shouldn't say that. In the previous games, the numerical value representing your health and your ammo, etc., was always on the screen. And in this, your reticle has like a ring around it that's sort of segmented, and those segments represent, how much health you have, how much energy you have, what your ammo is like, in your left hand and right hand weapons, etc. I hate this. It took me a long time to get used to. I just think it's ugly and it's complicated. I would have just much rather have a numerical value attached to those stats. Head units control a shitload in these games for some reason, like your movement speed, your weapon accuracy, your scanning ability. It's really, really weird. Like, a lot of the parts now have stats that you wouldn't necessarily think would apply intuitively to those parts. I feel really conflicted about this game. I'm gonna put it. I probably enjoy it more than Armored Core 2 or Another Age, so I'm gonna put it here at the top of because, like I said, there were things about it I liked a lot. I liked the way that movement felt. I like the weighty, sort of lumbering feel of the ACs, even though I know that a lot of people really didn't. But I mean, this game just has a lot of problems, man. I mean, the missions are very samey. You're returning to the same environments again and again and again. The boss battles are not very good. The story is weak. Yeah, it's just not as much as I wanted to like it. By the end of it, I just wasn't really into it. And another thing we should talk about is the multiplayer. I think that you could reasonably assume that part of the reason the story mode of this game feels a bit paltry and undercooked is because they really went heavy in the multiplayer aspect of this game. Like, you can tell that they really wanted Armored Core to be a multiplayer sensation, and they clearly put a lot of time and energy into that. And I think that the single player campaign just was really hurt by that process. So yeah, that's Armored Core 5. Not the worst game, but also just, it's too flawed for me to put it anywhere above tier. So that brings us to our final game. Again, not sure why there's another Armored Core 5 here, but next we have Armored Core Verdict Day. Now the way that I would describe Armored Core Verdict Day is that it is essentially to Armored Core 5 what 4 Answer was to Armored Core. It's every single thing that Armored Core 5 did, but better. And I'm going to put this up in the excellent tier. In fact, I'm going to put it like right there. I really enjoyed this game a lot. The story basically deals with these things called the Towers, which are like these beacons of ancient technology that are fought over by these 3 major corporations that I think are called like the 3 Forces or something like that. A war breaks out. You're a mercenary in that war, etc. You get the idea. Yeah, I like this game a lot. I'm probably not going to have too much to say about it just because, like I said, every single thing that I complained about with Armored Core, like the mission variety, the story, all that sort of thing, is just better in Verdict Day. Like, just straight up better. I liked the mission environments a lot in this. There's a lot more detail put in. Like, in the background of a lot of the missions, you can see like explosions going off and just sort of like other skirmishes happening, like sort of beyond the scope of what you're currently doing. And it just really makes you feel like you are just like in the dead center of this global conflict in a way that honestly no other game in the franchise has really attempted to achieve in quite the same way. This game is very fucking hard, in my opinion. I will say that. Like, it is definitely one of the more challenging games in the series, in my opinion. I had a very tough time with it. The last boss, in particular, is absolutely brutal, man. Like, it is maybe the toughest fight in the entire franchise. Like, that's how tough it is. And there's a lot of hard fights, okay? But yeah, it's just really fun. The story is better. I don't want to get too much into it because, again, this video is not about the story, but I did find it fairly interesting. Another thing that this game does that I like is that it brings back weapon tuning. That wasn't really a thing in Armored Core 5 to my knowledge, but every time you buy a weapon in Armored Core Verdict Day, you can apply points to like weapon power and accuracy and things like that. I really enjoy that. Another thing, something I forgot to mention with Armored Core 5 is the way that the missions were structured. The missions in Armored Core 5, at least the story missions, are very long and they're very difficult. And the way that they chose to handle that in Armored Core 5 was that you could actually checkpoint yourself, or not checkpoint yourself, but you could restock on health and ammo and change your build mid-mission by going to these spots called workshops. And each time you could do it several times in mission, but every time you did it, it would cost more and more. So like the first time it would cost you $10,000, then like 15, then 30, then 50, then 100. And the way that the reason they did this is because the missions are generally very long and difficult, and the enemies in Armored Core 5 do a shitload of damage to you. Like, I can't tell you how many times that I would peek around a corner and somebody would do an attack at me that would literally just take like a fourth of my health bar. And you basically are forced to use those workshop checkpoints. And while I'm grateful that they're there, I would much rather they not be there. I didn't really like that as a solution for how punishing the game is. You know, that is handled a lot better in Verdict Day. There are no more workshops. The way that they handled it was just to make the story missions a little bit shorter, but no less difficult. I mean, they're just not like the kind of marathon sprint that Armored Core 5 ended up being. So yeah, Armored Core Verdict Day, I think it's an excellent game. It's the last game in the franchise till Armored Core 6, and I really enjoyed my time with it. So yeah, that's gonna be it. This is what my experience with the Armored Core series was like. After more or less rushing through all 15 of these games in a little under 2 months. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I know it's a little bit different. It's a little bit off the cuff. As you can tell, I am not editing this video at all. So this is just going to be my straight thoughts off the head. So yeah, I can't wait for Armored Core 6. Thanks for watching.